So, in thinking back about my training and sort of my path to where I am now, I don't think that there is like a very specific reason for why, or a point in time when I made that decision. When I think back, I think that the early seeds of my decision to become, or should I say my desire to become a research scientist, date back to the time when I decided that I was gonna do anesthesiology and intensive care medicine for my residency training. And what I really liked about that, the specialty of anesthesiology, is that it really melts together the clinical part of taking care of patients with very many like basic science disciplines, thinking about pharmacology, thinking about physiology, thinking about pathology. And so I really liked the idea of being able to fuse together those two worlds. And then that kind of thinking and that sort of desire kept going later on when I decided that I was gonna come to the US to pursue an experience in basic science research. And that was here at UVA in one of the anesthesiology department labs. It was a great experience. I learned a lot, and I really enjoyed it. And that truly cemented then my desire to pursue a PhD that ended up being in pharmacology and toxicology, and sort of search for formal training that would allow me then to become a clinician scientist. And that's how I ended up where I am. Yeah, this is a great question, and it actually made me a little smile when I read it, because the honest answer to this question is that I doubt my abilities as a scientist almost on a daily basis. Those of you who want to come see my lab will see that there is a piece of paper that's taped on the door of my lab, and it's a opinion piece, I guess you would call it. It's titled something along the lines of the importance of stupidity in scientific research. It's actually a piece that was written by one of the professors here at the University of Virginia, and it discusses the idea that research scientists should become comfortable around the idea of how ignorant they are, even in their very specific area of expertise, and talks about the fact that once you accept that thought, then the best course of action and the best possible action becomes muddling through this ignorance, trying to answer your research questions to the best that you can. And so I really try to remind myself of that piece almost on a daily basis. I would say pretty much almost all of the experiments that we're doing in the lab and the questions that we're trying to answer have not been addressed before. So we're trying to do things that have not been done before. And so it's not easy, and there's not much that we can go about. And so, again, it goes down to the point of, for all practical purposes, our ignorance is infinite. And so I think that the best that you can do in a scenario like that is try to teach yourself, try to read, be familiar with what other labs have done, other groups. Reach out to colleagues that may be smarter than you, may have a different point of view, may be looking at the same problem differently. try to be thoughtful and really think through some of the research questions that you have. And then ultimately also practice some self-compassion in realizing that you're trying to do something that hasn't been done before, that it is gonna be hard, and that you just try your very best, your best level effort, and that's all that you can do. Right. This one also made me smile a little bit because I'm afraid I don't have the answer for this one either. I can honestly say that work-life balance has been and is probably the number one challenge for me, and that, you know, it's a struggle, and I don't know that I have the answers. You know, while there are some, you know, tricks or skills or some strategies that are practical that I try to use to be efficient and so forth, I think that that's something that many women that are trying to have a career and also a personal and a family life struggle with. For me, one big help has been having a partner, specifically my husband, who has been extremely supportive of what I do. He understands my passions. He shares those passions with me. He understands that my passion for research and science is a big part of who I am, and he supports me and respects me for that. And in many ways, I think that's been fundamental, and I don't know that I could do what I do without his support. Another aspect that has been important to me is really trying to, again, go back to that concept of self-compassion and realizing that there might be times when I'm more focused on my work, say that there is a deadline for a grant or a deadline for a paper, and accepting the fact that my family might be suffering temporarily because of that, but also knowing that after that grant is out or that paper is out, that it is okay for me to leave the lab maybe an hour later, an hour sooner, not later, so that I can spend time maybe with my daughter or my husband. That's me, but I think everybody is different, and everybody has to find their own ways to coping with it. Yeah, I was thinking about this one, and I don't necessarily know per se that I have like a different way of mentoring, you know, female mentees versus male mentees. What I do know though is that with the female mentees, I do make a point to have open discussions with them about many issues and challenging surrounding the, you know, work-life balance, you know, topic. You know, I did find during my residency training and then during my PhD that really nobody had those discussions with me, and I wish it had been different. I feel that when I was in residency and then starting my career as an early scientist, I was quite naive when it comes to that, and didn't really know much, and so I do think I would have benefited from having that training and sort of those discussions. And so I do try now to have those with my female mentees, you know, making them aware of some of the challenges that they may be facing when they are trainees, but also once they'll enter the workforce. Hopefully sharing with them some of the maybe skills or some of the strategies that one could potentially use to cope with those difficulties. And if nothing else, I tell myself, even just being sort of a practical example that, you know, many women do struggle, and that it is okay to struggle. And here I am, I have my struggles and I keep going, and that's okay. Yes, so I cannot say that, as far as I know, as far as my trajectory and my path so far, that international women scientists face different challenges compared to non-international women in science. But I do think that women in science do face unique challenges in comparison to their male counterparts. In my personal experience over the years, I have found that I had to work a little bit harder, and I was being held to a little bit higher standards than some of my male colleagues and friends, to achieve, you know, the same level of recognition. And I still to these days find that I have to be quite proactive in asserting myself in comparison to some of my male friends, to be taken seriously. So to answer your question, what can be done to change it? I think that would be like in itself like a 2-hour conversation. There's a lot that I think can be done, and I think should be done. One thing that comes to mind to me, and that's based on my personal experience when I had my little one, Sophia, who is almost 6 now. I do think in the academic environment that it would be important to have flexible paths to promotion. Paths that keep into account the fact that in many instances women are trying to have a career and be promoted, but at the same time, oftentimes more often than male counterparts, have a desire or are called to attend to other tasks, having children, wanting to spending time with children, having to care for sick parents or aging parents or a sick family member. And so I do think that we shouldn't be asking women to do all of this in the same time frame and achieve the same requirements to promotion while doing all of this. I think that there should be flexible paths, maybe considering longer periods of times or flexible paths to re-entry that avoid putting females in a situation where they have to choose between having a career or being a mom or being the main care provider at home. And so avoiding putting women in a situation, women or whoever really decides to that they want to be a primary caregiver, avoid putting them in a situation where they have to drop out of the workforce. That would be the first thought.